witness my elemental mastery.
Gotta stretch!
You don't stand a chance.
MerFight!
You're done. You don't stand a chance. You're done.
Get back here!
Ow! Quiet! Quiet! You're not getting away. This is over before it started.
Die. Perish. Die. Breathe.
You're not getting away.
Die.
Sever thy pride.
Go.
Pierce thy heart. Forgive me.
MerFight.
All right, I'm starting soon. I just wanted to kind of test to make sure my mic is working and other stuff. Yeah, I'm going to be starting in about a minute. If there's anyone else that comes in, feel free to chat. I'll be trying to check any questions and whatnot as I go through the presentation. There's just a few technical things I'm trying to work out. might have to just minimize the YouTube window because it is not playing very nice. That might be the main issue. All right, well that is annoying, but it seems I have to close the YouTube window because otherwise it just makes everything lag, which fine. So I won't be able to answer any questions mid-presentation, but I'll have a Q&A session near the end. So apologies for that. But with that said, I'm just going to start with my presentation. There we go. So this is the MerFight 1.0 discussion and retrospective about the development. So I'm just gonna jump right in. So version 1.0 of MerFight will be live soon, probably after midnight tonight is what I'm thinking. I need to, test the build, make sure everything's okay, and all that stuff. So I'm not going to be launching it today. It's going to be sometime after midnight for when that actual 1.0 release will be done. I wanted to do this presentation today. I originally was going to do it tomorrow, but there's a lot of events and things that different streamers and players are doing. There's a link to a bunch of them. So I wanted to just sort of do this today, sort of before it comes out so that, more of the focus can be onto the game and the people playing the game. So the final build of MerFight, as it's not very changed a ton since previous versions. There's 12 characters. Each one has combo challenges. Each has their own tutorial. There's the block and punish mode, and each character has at least 3 costumes. There's a simple arcade mode, as well as local versus, story mode, which has a lot of different fights in it. There's online, which has the rollback netcode with my own custom solution. There's 16 player lobbies. There's the replay mode. And then I also recently created a demo that you can download on Steam if you haven't gotten the game yet. It has 4 characters, and those will rotate every month randomly. And then the only modes that are locked are challenge, arcade, and story. So you can still play a majority of the game, and you can still play online. And it should work that version players of 1.0 of the main game should be able to play with version 1.0 of the demo. I wanted to do this because even though the game is relatively cheap compared to, AAA titles, I still like the ability for people to play things and not have to create a sort of barrier by price right off the bat. So I think a demo, especially for this genre, is extremely useful. But hopefully people will, enjoy the game and help support my efforts with it. So is the game 100% done? It's pretty close. I'd say it's about 98% done outside of some story mode stuff in terms of visuals. And, I'm leaving early access because even though, there's still stuff I could be doing and want to be doing, it's not, the updates aren't really feeling that big. There's not a ton of gameplay changes. There's no really new characters coming. So I felt like it was a good time to leave early access at this point. So I was just like, each update just kind of has that feeling to it. It's just like, there's nothing really big going on. So this 1.0 release will kind of just be like, here, the game's done. It's being put in the open, and it's not going to be touched a ton. Which is now, now what? So post-launch support for the game, I'm splitting up into 3 categories. There's urgent things, there are polished things, and there are new things. Before I talk about these, I'm going to be right back, actually. Okay, and I'm back. I just wanted to, because the stream was causing issues, I wanted to still have it up in a way that I could see at least if anyone has questions or something during the... Okay, and I'm back. I just wanted to, talk. Anyway, so urgent things that I would be doing, like changes would be like if there's a game crashing bug that someone finds very early, or there's an optimization issue where like 90% of players can't play on a certain stage because if it's lagging really badly, or someone's like, oh, I found this infinite combo with this character or this one hit kill thing. I'd be like, okay, I will make a build and try to fix those things ASAP. Polish things, those are smaller things like typos, VFX improvements, story mode improvements, just quality of life things, netcode improvements, localization, anything that if I didn't do, the game would still be playable and it wouldn't really be that big of a deal at the end of the day. It's things I want to do periodically, but it's stuff that I don't necessarily need to do, but it would improve the overall game. And part of the reason I mentioned sort of the QA level stuff is I am a solo dev at the end of the day. You know, early access has been great in terms of people finding stuff and helping with that, but there are always going to be things that people miss, including myself. So I don't have a dedicated team of quality assurance members. So it's, you know, there's going to be stuff that missed. So part of the polish phase is going to be going through the game and fixing these small things that if I didn't fix, the game would still work. It just, you know, would just look less polished. And netcode improvements is one of those. So we've had multiple tournaments. The netcode is tolerable, I'd say. There are some issues, like if someone from Russia wants to play someone from Eastern US, yes, that connection is not going to be the best. But they, you know, they happen. So there's two ways I could go through this that I want to do eventually, because MerFight uses Photon Unity networking, which is kind of not deprecated, but there's not really going to be updates for it. There's Fusion Unity networking, which I can carry over the solution very similarly, and apparently it does do, at least it tries to do peer-to-peer without going to a relay server, unlike Photon Unity. So it would be a smoother conversion, but there's more experimental. It'd be more experimental because it's not really how you're supposed to use it. But I think the way I'm using Pun is not really how you're supposed to use it either. Then the other solution is using Quantum, which does use relay servers, but it's much more stable and it's actually meant for rollback netcode and determinism, and it kind of just, it's what it's meant to do. But it's a little bit more time consuming a conversion. But one of the benefits would be, you know, you can join a room and watch it like mid game. Right now, if a game starts and you join the room, you just have to wait until the match is over, and that's kind of the end of it. Both would require a lot of rework of the lobby system, though, which is why I haven't really jumped on doing it, because I don't know how long that could take. So I'd rather say, hey, the game's out, playable, and eventually there'll be this rework. And then finally, for new content, I'd love to do new costumes. I'd love to get 6 per character eventually. Right now, some characters only have 3. Thinking maybe doing costume DLC, but I definitely would not do, like, here's a costume for $15, because that would be more than the game itself, which would be silly. I'd like to do new characters in general, but this just involves a lot of work. I think my original goal is to have, like, double the cast eventually, but I think there might be a reality where it only gets 4 new characters. But we'll see. That depends how long it takes to do a new character. There's the lore challenge mode, which I cut, but maybe I could add that back in. Boss battles and just more unique match modifiers would be really cool to get in. I don't know if that's going to happen either, but these are all things I'd like to do, or really want to do, but there's no promise or timeline as to when I'll actually get them done, because who knows how long these things take. But I did start working on a new character. I've thrown the name around, but that is just a very, very early model preview concept of them that I've been playing around with, because a new character requires a lot. The 3D model itself, you know, that I have a pretty decent speed on that, probably about a week, but the animations is what takes a really long time, probably like a month or 2. And that design is kind of intertwined as I do it, which I'll talk about in the retrospective portion. And then there is balance and frame data, which can take a really long time, and just testing the character. I know Skullgirls, I think, has a character like in beta that you can play, and I'm like, I could maybe take that route. I could do it just Patreon only, or even a Kickstarter. Like, there's a lot of different ways to approach it, but those are like what you need to get a character working, or what I need to make to get a character working. But there's a ton of other stuff too. There's voiceover, there's VFX, there's original music, stage, story mode, content tutorial, challenge combos, block and punish combos, and the character select art. And I don't even have AI listed on here, which is another one. So the next part of this presentation or stream that I'm doing today is the retrospective. Retrospective is just a discussion about what happened during the development and release process with goals of improving things in the future based on those learnings. So I'm going to go over my goals, what went well, what didn't go well, what I would change, and what I've learned for future projects. So MerFight originally started as a rollback netcode prototype during a jam week in 2018. I have not been working on it 40 hours a week for 6 years. Like, I don't think I would ever want to work on something that long, but like, so there was a lot of downtime where I didn't touch the game for a couple months. I don't work on it every day. Lately I have been, because I've just been trying to get it out the door kind of thing. But yeah, this is just some videos of the game over time. This is like the very first thing when I had tutorials working. This might be like the first MerFight tutorial or video. So like, this is how the game looked very early on. Then about build number 10, I had like an early Dragos preview of how that character looked and played. And even now, like the art style I was using, I think a toon shader asset to kind of do that. And the UI was very different. And then about 26 builds later, I have the look still kind of that plasticky look that I had for quite a while. And this is sort of just some gameplay changes. And then finally, the newest build, 51, is sort of where the game is now in terms of look and other things. There we go. So my goals for the game were, I wanted to create a fighting game with my own IP. Battle High, you know, that was worked on with the team and it wasn't 100% my own. So I wanted to make something that I could call my own. And I wanted to make something with my own rollback netcode solution. And then I would want to use MerFight as a portfolio piece for future work. My goals were never like to pay all my bills through MerFight's profits, to create like $1 million IP media thing with like a Netflix show and a movie. And like, no, I wasn't doing all that, or even just getting MerFight on the Evo main stage. None of those were my goal. If any of those had ever happened, that would have been amazing and mind-blowing, but they were never my goals. My approach for the game would have had to have been completely different if I wanted to achieve any of those almost miracle level goals. Like those would have been like the amount of money I would have had to put into the game, the amount of like the size of the team. Like it's so, they're impossible goals almost. They're almost delusional, and I would have had to have a level of delusion if I really thought I could have done any of those without like really changing almost everything. And like even the game theming alone, it's just kind of like, why would any of those happen with something like this? So overall, I think what went well is I did feel like I hit the 3 main goals that I originally started with. I'm really happy that I was able to grow a Discord community for the game. Like, even though, you know, it's not the biggest community, I still really appreciate it. And we've had a lot of great tournaments. I had a lot of help with this though, of course. I had the Kickstarter to help fund the voiceover work. The game was featured in things that I would still call little, victories, like Evo social media in 2022. Pachi, another fighting game designer, really enjoyed it. I had the game at MagFest, so that was fun showing off there. I didn't get really overwhelmed by tasks, and I feel like the project was well organized. And I say that because one thing I had to do, for example, months after doing it, is I had done all the character VO facial animations, and I still had to do gammas because they have a few costumes without the mask. And I was like dreading it. I was like, oh, this is going to be so difficult because I haven't touched this system in ages. And then when I actually had to get around to it, it wasn't that big a deal. So it was kind of like future self thanking past self for keeping stuff organized and clean, that I was able to continue to work on the game smoothly. Another thing is I don't have any AI art use in MerFight. I use or at least 2D, I use a tool called Reallusion. I don't know what they use. I know it's an asset. They have pre-made characters and a character creator, which, I still do a lot of modeling, but it helps get like the initial base models made. And I will admit it's very tempting at times to want to use AI because, you know, as a small developer, small budget, you know, sometimes it's just like, yeah, I just need like a piece of art and it would be nice to just like, oh, I enter a prompt and I get art, but it just doesn't feel ethical to me. It feels, I think a lot would have to be done for AI stuff to become ethical, and I don't really know if it ever will, so I just don't at the moment feel comfortable using it. There were times though I did just want like small background art things, and I realized, you know, there are sites that just sell art. Vector Stock was one that I really liked, and I don't know if they use AI art because it's Vector, and I don't know if AI is there yet. And the other was just public domain art from a site called Raw Pixel, and I really was like, these are really useful, and I use them in Odon's stage, for example. All those portraits on the right are public domain art, so it's sort of nice that there are outlets for like someone on a small budget who just needs something to fill space without, you know, stealing from artists potentially without their permission. So what didn't go well? I would say the first thing is the art direction and pre-production, or the lack thereof. Again, the game started out as a prototype jam week style thing, and I didn't like have like a huge art direction and book of like how I wanted the game to look and stuff. So that was kind of the biggest issue, is like the art direction and artistic vision of the game has never been strong. As you can see from the videos at the bottom, like the style changed a lot, and even at the end it's like, it's not, I don't have like an art concept thing of like what I really wanted the game to look like. I'm happy with how it looks, but I know it's not like perfect. You know, I went, yeah, like I mentioned, I went from flats to cell shading, back to this plastic look, back to cell shading or toon shading. I think spending some time knowing like what I wanted would have helped. Like just being like, okay, here's a mood board. I want like a watercolor type thing going. How can I achieve that? And just prototyping art for that, I think would have helped a lot. I also think story mode did not go super well. And this kind of goes to the lack of pre-production. I wanted a really big story mode, but I think it's a little bloated and caused delays, which I realize now, which is like, I hate the story mode I made. But the original story mode actually was even more complex because it was all branching from one fight, as opposed to now it's similar to just like, okay, each character has their own branching fight set. I'd say similar to, you know, BlazBlue and its visual novel story mode, at least in the first game. But I wasted like a whole month trying to do the branching thing, and I was just like, this isn't working. I need to try something else. Another story mode thing, which is more of a pre-production thing, is the theming is just like a little weird. I think if I had focused the game fully on like the elemental monarch part and made it more fantasy, or if I would have done just merfolk, I think would have been enough. But I have the two themes, which feel like they kind of butt heads or just make it very confusing and a little strange. Yeah, I agree. Like, I think, sorry, I'm just reading a comment. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like, it's not conventionally pretty. It's not a AAA fighting game. And some people are going to be cool and give that, you know, give a smaller title the grace of like understanding like, oh yeah, it's made by one person. Of course, it's not going to look like Tekken or Street Fighter 6. And then some people don't care. They're just like, games are games. It's all the same playing field. And that's fine. I can't tell people how to treat games at the end of the day. But going back to the story mode stuff, yeah, it's just like the theme is a little strange. And like, to answer the question, MerFight takes place on land. There's a story beat that all the merfolk are banished from the ocean and they can't stay underwater anymore, which is why they're on the land. One of the reasons was I didn't want to do underwater fighting, and I didn't want to have to deal with every character having a big fishtail. Though now I did think of a fun idea that I could maybe do for a sequel or a future game. So, yeah. Another one, a thing I didn't do well is I can be stubborn and a bit of a control freak. I'll admit it. Sometimes if I ask for feedback, wait, I feel like I missed a slide concerning story mode. They just got a little mixed up. You know, I'm going to do that because, oh wait, never mind. It's fine. It's fine. Anyway, I can be a bit stubborn. sometimes I'll ask for feedback and I will get it, and it's not feedback I wanted to listen to, so I'll get a little frustrated and ignore it. Or, you know, especially with unsolicited ideas and things, like I'll just ignore. I think it's the combination of being a solo dev and just being offended when people have ideas and you're just like, this is my thing. Like, how dare you try to change it, which is not a good quality to have, and it's something I need to work on. And I, you know, why my slides aren't out of order like I thought they did is for story mode. I feel like a lot of people, if I had pitched what I wanted to do, they would have been like, oh, that sounds too big. Like, why are you doing a story mode that big? And I would be like, well, no, I want to. And in a way with this, I kind of burned my own hand, and I kind of just had to do that to learn. But recently, after playing, you know, Mortal Kombat 1 and Tekken 8 and even Battle High, I was just like, oh, I could have definitely simplified this and delivered the narrative I wanted to, probably through fewer scenes, maybe just a few short scenes, like character bios, win quotes, and then, excuse me, and like that's about it. There's my ugly baby. You know, even if I'd gone the Mortal Kombat 1 route where every character only did like 3 or 4 fights, it would have been a lot shorter than what I did. So like right now, MerFight has 12 characters with 11 story mode fights and 3 endings for each. That's 168 scenes, all ranging from 10 to 30 lines of dialogue. So that's just a lot. That's a lot to have written, a lot to have edited, a lot to have visualized in the game. Mortal Kombat, if I would have went that route, say, and just been like, okay, every character only has 4 fights and somehow 3 endings. I don't really know how I would have done that. Still, that would have been half of what I did, essentially. And that would have saved a ton of time. And then like Tekken, playing their character stories anyway, like, because both those games have the huge giant cinematic story mode, which is out of budget and I'm not going to do. But Tekken, I think, has like 5 matches. They have a few special character intros. They have that one character intro that just says like, oh, this is so-and-so from so-and-so. Here's their story. And then just like a very simple, silly ending. Of course, those endings are very, you know, I don't have a team doing 3D CG endings, so that's a little different. But regardless, like all of these come up with like much smaller scope, which as a solo dev, I should have been more mindful of. I wanted branching and I wanted every character represented, but I feel like I could have done this differently. And part of the issue is I just sunk in too much time into it. So I was just like, whatever, it's happening. I didn't want to cut it. And I know there's like sunk cost fallacy, but at the same time, sometimes in dev, it feels like it takes more time to cut stuff than to just finish it. And that's sort of what ended up happening. In fighting games, I think single player content is really important for fighting games. But I think narrative delivery has to be more clever. And I don't think I was just very clever in MerFight. I should have done less to do more. And I needed to speak better to my strength. Like, I like writing, but visualizing that writing was the challenge and what really slowed things down. And that's like the one thing that isn't 100% done in MerFight story mode. You can play every story, you can read every story, but I wanted like characters to have reactions and facial animations and things like that. And that part is what I still need to do. I think Arctina's is done, but like some characters still need a little work with that. A mixed thing overall was I had, you know, I'm a solo dev, but I don't like saying that because all the time, because I hire contractors to do certain things that I know I can't do. You know, I struggle with collaborating as a whole, but there are some contract roles I really like working with. For example, I really like working with voice actors and musicians. I've never, other than like, I think I've had a musician ghost like once, I've never really had a ton of issues with voice actors and musicians. But when it comes to 2D and 3D artists, for example, I have a much harder time. For example, I had an artist that was working on the 3D environments. They only did like 3 and then they had to step away. But trying to have one person do 12 environments felt pretty immature and ambitious anyway. So that was on me to just like, of course, that's a very silly thing. And I realized the one issue with this is that long-term tasks take and require consistency, which is kind of the challenge. Like, there's not that much dialogue in MerFight, so like one voice actor doing a voice is not a big deal. Even if I had to like change a voice actor entirely, it wouldn't be that big a deal. But if I had one voice actor do every MerFight character, that's a much bigger deal then. And you kind of want variety in voice acting. You don't want one person doing every voice unless they're like amazing at doing that, and even that's kind of much. And the same goes for musicians, right? You want a variety in the soundtrack. So it's okay to have different musicians do different songs. It's not a big deal. But when you're, for example, for the character select portraits, I can't hire 12 different artists to do one portrait each. Like I could, but then there's this lack of consistency and it looks really strange. But it's hard to have one artist make sure they're available all the time to do stuff. And that's kind of one thing I struggled with. Thank you. Sorry, I'm not great at checking the comments as I talk. But yeah, so this is one challenge I had with just hiring artists and because sometimes, oh, okay, I did the 12, and then you're like, okay, I need you to do more for a different thing, and they're just not available anymore, and you're like, oh, what do I do now? Do I have someone redo all of it, or do I just get someone to do something else? It's very tricky, I would say. Oh, and the other part of it, too, is I didn't really have strong concepts for the 2D and 3D artists when I worked with them, and I kind of was like, yeah, you're the artist, you figure it out, and that's not a great approach for artists, especially with like if I were a studio and they were paid full time. Yes, that would be part of their job to do the concepting part, or there'd be a concept artist doing that. But that's not really how this works in my thing. So this is very harder solutions. I mentioned soft skills too because sometimes it's difficult working for contracts, and you don't like something, and then that just makes it really awkward. That's always a challenge too. That happens from time to time. But I think better planning would definitely help, at least with the 2D, 3D stuff, like knowing like what I want and having better examples and just being more thorough. Because when it comes to VO and music, it's a lot easier to be thorough. A voice actor will be like, here's my reel. And you'll be like, I really like the voice you did around 2 minutes in. I want the character to sound sort of like that. Or you can just be like, here's a few shows where characters that sound like this. And you have to write a script for them. You can't just be like, yeah, make up the dialogue for my character. Like a voice actor would be like, no. Or at least I would assume many voice actors would be like, no. And then same with music, here's some similar songs that I like. This is what I'm going for. I want a looping song around this length of time. Like there are things you can give to give direction. And I feel like I just didn't really give enough direction to the 2D and 3D artist. I would just be like, here's the character, here's their bio, here's a quick bio, here's a turnaround. So front, side, and, back view of the character. But like, probably should have been like, here are some poses that I like that I think represent this character well. And then they could have probably used that to formulate their ideas better. And the other two is just budgeting. If I know that having someone do 12, 13 or more pieces of art is going to be expensive, just like, I just need to budget for that. Or I need to be like, what, I can't afford to have someone do this, so I need to find solutions myself. I think the character select is a good example of like, if I was having struggles with finding character select artist, maybe I should have just been like, screw it, you just get the in-game art like some games do now, where you actually see the character rendered and stuff like that, instead of doing the 2D art. But I use the 2D art a lot, and I am happy with it at the end of the day. It's just one of those things that it can be a challenge to find somebody, and the amount of time it takes and things like that. It's not something you can be like, oh, I'm launching in a week, can you make like 12 portraits? And it's like, no, that's stupid. So here's some unfinished art, or not unfinished, it's line art, it's done, it just needs to be colored and used in game. This I just didn't use. I ended up going for a different artist for the character select art at the end of the day. So there's some of that. And then this is a ending piece of artwork I had commissioned. And this turned into the issue of just like, having someone do 36 ending artworks, or even just 12, was going to take a lot of time and just be very expensive. And I just, at some personal things happened, I just couldn't afford it anymore. So I was like, okay, this just isn't going to happen. But I felt it was important to show off this piece of art because I really do like it. But this is one of those examples where it's like, well, I have the characters, I can render them in 3D doing whatever I want. So if I wanted to, maybe that's what I could have done for 3D stuff. But even I was struggling with like, what do I actually want, and having to find that time, or having to find those concepts and taking the time to do that. Another thing that didn't go well is just not a lot of confidence in my designs and some knee jerk. So I enjoyed making the characters, but similar to art direction, I didn't go in with like strict character design ideas and strong concepts. I wasn't like, oh, these are their weaknesses and their strength and the strategies of how to play them. It was more just like, oh, I'm animating. I was referencing some frame data maybe to just be like, okay, heavy tech should be about this long. And then I'd just be like, oh, I got Octonia's tentacles rigged and working properly. That's cool. And that was really about it at the end of the day. So it was just very like, that's sort of how I was approaching the design. It was very just off the cuff. So this caused some issues where I just felt like I came off very unsure about my designs, and when players would ask things, I feel like I was way too easily swayed. It kind of felt like I was player pleasing in a way. And I think it's weird though, because you don't want to be, it was like, I don't want to be like, oh no, everyone's wrong and everything I'm doing is right. Because there are some good suggestions that came out of that at the same time, but I feel like it just made me feel like I wasn't really confident in my designs. So I tended to knee jerk is what I would refer to. And I think other people do that. You know, you have a play test and you just like change everything based on like one or two feedback, and you don't really take the time to say, well, this is the feedback. What is really the problem? And sometimes part of that is just takes a really long time. And sometimes just sort of, it's easier to just like go with the fast answer, even if it's not always the best. I think a really good example of this was, Coderius was a really good MerFight player, and they won several tournaments with Dragos. Even they won the Magfest tournament in person, and it kind of was like, oh, this character must be really broken and needs to be nerfed, because the same player is winning every tournament, which not only caused them to get really frustrated, but then it just wasn't like, well, part of the reason I got frustrated is I was overlooking other character stuff. So it should have been like, okay, well, if I do these nerfs to this character, where are other characters having similar problems? And it was kind of just very amateur of me to just be like, oh, I got to nerf this one character and all this stuff. So that's sort of, I think, a big thing that didn't go as well as I would have liked. Yeah, and it's just take more time to my design, especially like if and when I start the MerFight DLC characters, just take a little bit of pre-production time. Be like, what do I want this character to actually feel like? What am I actually going for? What do I think it's doing well and not? And just kind of really thinking about that offhand. Yeah, that is a good point. There were some system issues that had to be nerfed and changed around, but even then, like changing those system issues could have maybe helped observing at them from every single character and not just like that character in particular. Another thing that didn't go well is the CPU fighters in the game are not the best. I just suck at programming CPU fighters. Battle High, the original Battle High is not the best single player AI, and MerFights are not the best. They're fine if you just like want to play story mode or things like that, but like I need to get better at it, and something I want to improve. Because I feel like my big issue is I make them way too hard at first, but then they have like very easy strategies. And I need to just do more research on the subject and just make better. Yeah, and I think doing it earlier on would be a much better strategy than being like, okay, now I got to do this whole giant AI task for every character, and instead making it more of a generic thing that can kind of work well with every character. But it's a very difficult thing for me to really wrap my head around. It's just something I need to improve. Another thing that I want to improve for future games is writing and localization. I think there was a bigger audience in Japan and Korea, and I wish I would have spent more time doing localization from the start, because one of the challenges with localization is you have to organize all of the game text in a way that can be easily not only shared with the localization team, but then also be implemented in game. So you can't like hard code anything, any string or any text is hard coded. You have to make sure it's like properly being parsed by the localizer, and there's all kinds of challenges with it. And there's a lot of text in MerFight. So I had someone helping, so there's a little bit of Korean localization, at least for the main menu, but like even that, it's hard too, because you can't like, you have to wait kind of till the end when you make sure all the text is like 100% before it's localized, because then you have the problem of like, oh, we changed this text, now I gotta go back to the localization team and have that issue. And I've been on a lot of teams that don't do this. I worked at a company previously. I would remember there'd be a lot of projects where we'd be like, the client's not wanting localization, right? And they're like, no, it's fine. And then we get like 3 months in, and this client is like, oh yeah, we also want it in Spanish, and we haven't done any of this localization work because it takes extra time. It takes extra initial like time at the start, and it's very difficult to do. So it's not surprising, but it is something a lot of devs, including myself, should just do early on, because it makes things easier then. Also, I entered a lot of text in Unity Editor, which was a mistake. Like, there are so many typos in the tutorial I was not aware of till someone pointed it out, and I actually like took it into a word processor and was like, yeah, there's a bunch of typos. So I think one of my future goals is like anything that needs proofreading with spelling and grammar should just not be enter it in Unity, because it's not highlighted, and it, or if I want to just like, hey, here person that I've hired to read my text, here is just a Word document, or not a Word document, a Google document that you can just read and make comments, and it's much smoother than being like, pull down the entire multi-gig project in Unity or through GitHub or something. Just like, that would be annoying. Environments are also one thing that didn't go super well. I had an artist working on them. They did GG, Jargos, and Bolt stage at first. Jargos is actually very close to the version they did, but the other ones are very different. And they had to step down, unfortunately, before doing any more. It was not like, it wasn't like a fight or anything. They were just like, hey, I can't do this anymore. And it was totally fine. So I ended up taking them over, which I'm not really the strongest environment artist already. So, yeah, that was just one of the challenges. And one of the issues is that I was treating the environments like 2D. So during some of the intro animations and the win animations, which I did not cut anymore, I realized I left that in. I actually re-implemented those. They showcase how empty some of the environments are, which I don't love. And I was designing environments from a very planar perspective when I should have been more hemisphere mindset oriented. There's the Jargos scene. I think the only big difference is it didn't have the coral in it. I think I added that, and that was like kind of the big change. But the fish and the replacement and the rocks were very much like what the original artist had made. So this is a GG's scene inside 3ds Max, the program I use for modeling. So from this left and right view, it was like, fine, it's doing what I do or want. But when you rotate it, you can just see like how empty it is. And during some intros, like strikes, it just showcases that really badly. And I've tried to fix that in the latest things, but like when doing this, I should have thought more about these sort of regions and had it sort of arc of sort of like how the environment goes. That is something I'm going to keep in mind in the future for sure, but it is sort of the big struggle with the environment art, and it's very easy to forget, because if this is a straight up 2D fighting game, this would not have been an issue because everything would just been straight on. There's no camera rotation or anything like that. So what would I change if I could start MerFight over back in 2018? Probably figure out art direction sooner. Just kind of know, what do I want? How do I want this game to look? And kind of just go from there. Figure out the character designs more concretely and but at the same time, not be so easily swayed by player feedback and tournament results, especially in early access. I would change the narrative probably to make it more merfolk centric and cut the elemental stuff. I have some ideas how to address this in the future DLC characters, or if I ever do a sequel, I have ideas, but I'll write those ideas down and do some more pre-production on them. And just a shorter story mode in general, and focus more on improved AI or just fun single player content. I mentioned Mortal Kombat 1 and Tekken 8 again because their thing of just like, yeah, you just fight a bunch of AI opponents out wearing different costumes or have different like slight RPG elements is at least engaging for me as someone who likes single player content. So I kind of feel like there are times where I'm like, oh, I really wish I would have done something more like that for MerFight instead of the story mode that I did, because then again, the narrative stuff kind of just, sank a lot of time. And then early access was kind of weird. I don't think early access was bad. And I think early access is kind of in a weird space where it doesn't really work the way people intend. But I wish I would have piecemealed it more, like maybe had 6 characters at first and then been like, oh, every month here's a new character. And that would have, I think, garnered more excitement from the early access crowd instead of being like, here's all 12. They're going to be polished over the next year and a half or 2 years. Yeah, again, what I just said. Start with a few characters, introduce more. So the future learnings for future games is going to be very similar. Less is more when it comes to narrative. Know what I want more when I contract people, especially for 2D and 3D artists, meaning like give them more direction overall. Be confident in my decisions, but think it out better, because that will, create the confidence. But that's kind of a balance too, because I don't want to also be the opposite where it's like, I never listen to player feedback because I'm always right and everything. So that's kind of a challenging thing to keep in mind. Like implementing rollback from day one, which is one good thing I did. I met the goal, so that's sort of why. Localize early. So if I think my game has any potential to, have any success in a country other than the US, I should probably spend like a little bit of time doing localization work early. So that's something I want to keep in mind for future things. And then just sort of have fun. I did have fun developing MerFight, but I do think there are times where the product level of things, like, oh, it needs to look good, it needs to be perfect, and the text in the stores need to be a certain way, and I gotta marketing, and it's just like, it's important to do to a degree, but I think it got a little too stressful, and I just started to get more stressed about like selling the game than just about enjoying the development process of it. So I'm gonna take a little time now to thank some people. So I'm going to, give me 1 second. All right, I'm not gonna, all right, there we go. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to go through the credits of the game and thank everybody who has worked on it to some degree. I'm not going to talk about myself because that's annoying. So Tom, or Mohawk's Gridlock, as a lot of people know him, has been the community organizer for MerFight, and has helped a lot with the game in a variety of ways in terms of feedback and helping organize online tournaments. They helped a ton at MagFest last year, so their help on the project has been invaluable, and I really appreciate it. So there's that. Then the narrative editor, William, has helped a lot with just reading all the story mode and giving good feedback on it. And, I didn't always take their feedback, but I definitely appreciated it. And having that second pair of eyes helped a lot, and they've helped with just a lot of editing the text, and I really appreciate it. They've also been a big supporter of the game, so I really appreciate that. Now, unfortunately, not all of this art is shown in the game, but there were 5 different people working on different illustrations. Blank is the one who did the current character select art. Nindio Art is the artist who did that unused character select art. Sandships did some stuff. They did a portrait of Gigi that I think I used early on for a little bit. Nox did the main cover art of the game, which is seen in a lot of places, so I really appreciate their art. And Freya Scott West, though I don't use their art, I still think it's important to credit them because they did contribute. They did that ending screen art of Gigi as in their Arctic costume, so I really appreciate that. And then some casting for the voice acting. Stephen W. Hunt did Battle High work. They also helped cast the VA in that. They essentially helped listen to different auditions and the script, so I really appreciate their help on the project. The voice actors, Atlas, Alan, I don't want to read these names because I feel like I'm going to mess up half of them and feel like a real jerk. Same with the musicians. So if I do mess up your name, I apologize in advance, but Alan Chan was the voice of Atlas. Then Anthony B. Perez is Bolt. Danielle McRae, who also voices Jada in Battle High, did Gigi. Bryce Buckley is Jargos. Megan McConnell as Angelique. Sean Grace as Naeko. Autumn Ivy as Octonia. Tom Gilvier as Strike. Jet Barker as Gamma. Sarah Ruth Thomas as Artina. Alex Ross as Odon. Jeffrey Hunt as King Ro, and Tom also did the announcer voice in the game. But I want to also give a special shout out to the voice actors because, again, I really like working with voice actors because I feel like they also like to celebrate the work that their voices are in, and they support it in a variety of ways, whether that's just shouting it out on social media or joining and talking in the Discord or even playing the game a bit. Like, I just really appreciate that and why I like working with voice actors so much. And then Pat Cleaver helped with sound effects design. They helped do some work with, for example, when the characters get KO'd and there's that echo, that was their idea, and they showed me how to implement that. They also helped clean up a lot of the voice acting when that was delivered, because one challenge is that every voice actor has different studio setups, and some are noisier than others, and that's all fine. That's why sound design and people who clean that up exist. So I really appreciate their work. So then the musicians, there's Lewis Thomas, who also has done a lot of Battle High music. They did a good amount of music for the menus as well as Strike's theme. Danielle Ron Coppola did 3 themes, Angelique's, Artina's, and Rose. It was funny, they were the first musician that had me have to figure out an interesting way to do intros. Because I was originally like, oh, I just want looping themes. And then they would be like, oh, here's an intro like track that you have to play first, and then it loops. And I was like, oh my, I have to figure this out. So that was a fun challenge to try to figure out. Landon Snodgrass did Gigi and Odon's theme. There's actually 2 versions of Odon's theme, but I cut the one version because it wasn't the final version. Also, apparently it really activated someone's tinnitus, so they did not like it. So it was kind of for the best that they redid Odon's theme. Pat also did 2 themes for Bolt and Gamma. Then Wayne Masam II, who was part of a group called Neptune's Cloud, did Octonia's feud or theme. Vitor Amato did Atlas and Neekos, and finally Rob Tunstall did Jargos' theme. And then for the 3D environment help, that is the artist's pen name that they used for the game. So I still think, even though a lot of their work is still not in the game, I think it was important to credit them regardless. And a lot of their work still is, like a good portion. I mean, they did 1 stage and that's enough to be credited, so I'm not going to cut someone's name. Then I have all my patrons. I feel like I missed some of these, or I don't even know how many of these are still patrons, but there's my list of patrons that were active during the course of development. And then I have finally all my Kickstarter backers whose names I'm not all going to read, but I appreciate everyone who, decided to contribute and take a risk on, contributing a game from, at the time, a relatively unknown developer, or still unknown, really. And just, helping me give the game a voice through, by allowing me to hire voice actors for the game. And then a few that I realize I need to add, actually I just realized now, one of my Discord members, Eliza Kuhn, had helped with the Korean translation for the main menu. I should probably put like that. I feel bad being like localization when it's like barely complete, but I should probably put that in. And then Mr. MKL helped with the trailers. There's actually a new trailer that will be used for the Steam page and launching on my YouTube later today. They've been a big help, and they've supported the game a ton. There's a lot of people I don't list, but that have, Alex Alchemy, ACP Crab, a lot of the Fraud Crew members. There's a lot of people who have supported the game and played it online in tournaments and stuff, and I really appreciate their support of the game. And just anyone who's ever played it. If you played the game and enjoyed it, even if you didn't enjoy just the fact that you took the time to try it, at least I appreciate, for sure. Especially if you've, taken the time to review it on Steam and whatnot. That's another thing I appreciate people doing. So that's all. This is the special thanks portion of the stream. So I just want to say thanks to everybody who's made the game, what it could be. And I'm glad that, there are people out there who enjoy playing it. And, like I said, it's not 100% done. I'm not going to be like, oh, it's done, never touching it again. It's just, I need a break. I want to work on other things out there. And so that's sort of what I'm doing now. But I will be coming back to it and adding more content in the future. All right. So I think with that said, there's my special thanks. And I don't know if anyone's in my chat, but if there are, I'm going to just maybe do a few minutes of question and answer. If there's any questions or answers that people have, I'd be more than happy to answer. And I understand doing this a couple hours before the Super Bowl was probably not the best choice, but I didn't want to do it on Monday when it is in 1.0 and people are playing it and whatnot. So totally fine if I don't have actually anyone to Q&A with at the moment. So I'm not I think, so there's a question of any reason I'm not a fan of demos for trials. One is just implementation time and time to implement. And I think I like trying to leave it up to players to kind of figure out the thing on their own, because at least some of the trials are very just like goofy and like, yeah, this is not a like actual useful trial, unlike some of them. So I like to kind of leave it up and just leave like little hints to see if you can do it yourself. But the main reason is just the time to implement and do. And that could be a polished thing I could see doing in the future. If enough people are like, yeah, I really want demos of these, it's like, yeah, I could probably figure out how to do that eventually. Probably when it's more of a time consuming, or yeah, it's more of a time issue than like oh, I hate demos in games. I think the thing too for me is, at least in other games, I don't find the demos that useful sometimes. Like sometimes they're useful and sometimes I do and I'm like, yeah, I'm doing exactly this and it's not working and I don't understand the timing that you're trying to portray. So like this isn't helping at all. But for me, from a dev perspective, it's mostly just because they're time consuming. All right, I think that's the only question. So with that, thanks for watching, and there's the website for the game. Oh, any plans to allow for instant rematches? That would not be a bad feature to have for sure inside the main game. I think the reason I'm not doing it right now, or haven't planned it right now, because I think in quick play mode and ranked mode there is that. But I haven't done because I want to update the netcode anyway, and that's kind of a feature that I'd probably bring in when I update the netcode. So just being like, well, I have to redo a bunch of other lobby stuff anyway. Thank you. Yeah, I have to redo a bunch of stuff with the lobby work anyway, so I might as well just wait till then. Yeah, that makes sense. Like I try to load things relatively quickly and whatnot. I know, like, I think that's actually one advantage, that if I were to redo the game in Quantum, like, it'd actually be really easy to reload certain things, but that's sort of like that juggling thing, because they have a way of, like, I could do the game where it's like, yeah, I just really reset the simulation and not have to reload really anything, as opposed to now I reload the scene just because it helps clean up memory. So that's sort of how I approach that for now. Yeah, the 4-stage change can be good. The stages don't really do anything in the game, so there's actually another thing I forgot to mention, is like the story mode. Like, why did I want to do 12 stages? Like, I love when each character has their own stage and their own theme, but knowing my stuff is kind of on a smaller budget, like, why didn't I just do like 8 stages and like 4 of them have nighttime changes and different, like I could have gotten away with that. You know, and that might be a thing that happens with the DLC characters. It might be like, yeah, it's the same stage, but it's a different time of day. All right. Well, I think with that, unless there's any more questions, just want to thank everyone who watched. Hopefully more people will watch this later. There's the URL to the website. I'm going to be doing a little bit of updates on the website, I think, before I launch. But yeah, like I said, the game itself, the 1.0 version will go live probably sometime after midnight, because I just do want to test it today, finally, make sure like most things work and make those changes to the credits, like I said. So just small little things, but I still need to do those, make sure everything's 100% before I can launch it to 1.0. So thanks for watching, and I appreciate it, and thanks for playing.